So excited to be with you tonight. I think we have an hour, and really we want to spend just a lot of time engaging in conversation. Whatever questions you may have and you want to ask, we're looking forward to answering those, and whatever questions you guys might want to lead to. We have a small video clip too. We thought we would show. As a way of kind of introducing just our experience of the Paul film, and kind of, we call it the heart behind the story. Like it'll give you a sense, a quick sense about who we are. I've always liked to tell people that filmmaking is, we love filmmaking, but we love people, and we love, and we know we've been called. This is what God has given us as our vocation, as a mission, to reach out to people with and to create things that are beautiful, good, and true, so that they might encounter Christ. And so filmmaking is what God has put in front of us as a way, as a tool of allowing us to minister and connect with people. And that's the bottom line for us in where we've come from. You know, TJ and I both have come from different backgrounds, and in our journeys to get to where we are today. And it's really cool to see how the Lord guides and things, when I look back on my life, things that what I wanted to do compared to what I am doing, and what I thought I might do compared to what I am doing. I like to tell people that, you know, when you, for me personally, there was a moment where, God kind of reached out in a very real way. I mean, I grew up in a family that was very much practicing our Catholic faith, but like so many of us, we kind of go through those motions, and go to church on Sunday and say the prayers. But when I was 16, I had an encounter, and it was a real personal thing for me. And on that encounter with Christ, in a moment of prayer and time with others, I heard a threefold message, and it was very simply, I love you. And I know we hear that all the time. You go to church, we hear God loves us. But for some reason at that moment in my life, and I was a teenager, it was very profound for me that I love you. And then he said, I did this for you, as I was looking at a cross. And it became more of a profound understanding of what happened on the cross for me, and it became real. But the third thing that he said to me at that time in my life kind of scared me a little bit. He said, I want your life. And I remember I was dating who was my wife now, and I remember thinking, the first thing that came to my mind when God says to me, when I hear I want your life, I'm thinking he wants me to be a priest.
Dun, dun, dun.
And I'm thinking, it's not necessarily where I want to go with it, but I was willing to explore. I didn't know what he meant, I want your life, and I was willing to explore what that might look like. 30 years later, it's been quite a journey to get where I am, but it all starts with that moment of where we say, I'm willing to allow that to happen. So here we are in this journey today. We're really excited to share with you. And why don't we show that piece behind the scenes?
How many people saw Paul?
How many didn't? Just kidding.
It's a shame. Shame.
So how did you get to making this movie? I mean, that's not, I mean, it was obviously incredibly successful, but I think telling a story like that, it's not a small undertaking, and it's not something you do lightly. And hearing about you guys and listening to you talk, it's obvious you take your faith seriously, so especially because of that. This isn't something that's just let's try it and see what happens. How did you get to making a movie about Paul?
I always want to acknowledge like God's providence and God's plan in things. It's kind of ridiculous. Like when I look at the fact that we made this, it's in a lot of ways it's kind of ridiculous. And getting to where we are, and we'll talk about why we chose this story in particular. But we started out making short films for Catholic teens, as you know, and as they shared, we made over 200 films for Catholic teens, and really wanted to engage the young church in conversation about faith, and that led to conversation and people asking if we had films on lives of the saints, and we'd been asked that a lot of times, and we really didn't have any, and we're used to creating in the films in the short form space, and that was a moment where we decided to explore it, and God brought TJ into our ministry life, into the organization, and we just started dialoguing and talking about what it would look like to create films on lives of the saints. What might that look like? And long story short, we ended up producing our first one on Mary, Full of Grace. We wanted to really honor and start with the greatest apostle of all time in the Blessed Mother. But that led us to being able to, in opening doors for us, being able to do the film on Paul. And I think it was a combination of our writer-director had a desire and a passion to do the story of Paul. But we were also very much so, and TJ, you can speak to this, we really were also spending a lot of time kind of just reflecting on what's important to tell in culture today and what stories are needed, and especially in this time. And we really felt like that Paul story and his life and his example and what he experienced and what he went through and how he went, from being what he was to being what he became was an important message for people to share and hear.
Yeah, I would just say that our first film, full feature film, Full of Grace and Paul, I think Andrew and I, particularly when we met Eric, we felt that there wasn't any stories out there for our generation. I didn't start as a on fire, quote unquote, Catholic. Both Andrew and I both came from more of a secular background. And then coming into our faith later in life, we had this desire to rectify both. Where's the reasonable and beautiful depictions of these great stories that we know? And I think just reflecting a little bit on even my personal journey, when I first got back involved in the church, it was stories of people that really struck me, like Karol Wojtyła. I was didn't know about him, no one. I mean, I was cradle Catholic, but I mean, you hear John Paul II, but he wasn't personal. I didn't know he was an actor. I was an actor. That he was this incredible writer, that, he had a whole life. He was in the underground church in Poland. So these stories became interesting to us because they're these humanities that jump off the page and off the screen. And I think our film Full of Grace, for us, was such an incredible gift and a surprise, because that film, I don't know if you guys have seen that film. It's a quiet, small, meditative film. We thought it was going to be ODB outside the box prior to doing features, and we still keep our direct service ministry content, like our VCAT and our feature films. But we had done, let's say, 250, maybe max 10 minutes long. And so we thought maybe this would be 3 20-minute episodes. So we wrote it as such. But then we get on set, and we have just all the desire and the passion that we put into this thing, that on set we cast it with this incredible woman who played Mary. All of a sudden it became a feature film on set. We're like, oh, there's something else here. There's something more than we see. We started it with that just simple, humble heart of what would have Mary's life been at the end, the end of her days. What would that have looked like? And so it blossomed. What I'm saying is that it was as much as we put a lot of our energy and thought into it, there is an element here that's completely unpredictable, and that is God really jumping in. I'll just say our events, the film started to come alive when we would put the movie in front of audiences. It didn't have a theatrical release, so we would take it around to school, parishes, schools. And to see people's response to it, that Mary became not a statue. Andrew always uses this analogy. Not a statue that we see in church, but she became a mother, a woman, flesh and blood, was a revelation for people, and for us, first and foremost. So it was exciting to see the response to the art, and that helped us, I think, discern in the next phase of so can we take what worked here, what worked, kind of mutual discernment of do we see that something new is happening here? Yes. So how do we follow that, kind of cultivating the story that would become Paul and our future stories?
So you're talking a little bit about just those three things that you heard Jesus tell you, and it ended with, "Give me your life." Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got from that teenage self to where you are today, and how ODB Films became a thing, how you realized there's a need for that, especially in the Catholic world? And then can you also talk a little bit about your transition from the Hollywood kind of scene that we mentioned in your bio, and how you also became involved with ODB Films?
I was really fortunate to be involved in my parish and to have a parish where they had a really active youth ministry program. Really fortunate. It was an interesting scenario. So I'm 49, so I was kind of a kid of the 80s, right? And I graduated from high school in 87. And our community, twice a month, we would have 500 teens show up at the church for events because that's where we wanted to be. So I was fortunate to be around that, and it was facilitated by, it was led by a youth minister who really, for the 80s, he got it. He graduated Catholic, graduated from Wheaton College, was really on fire for his faith, and it was really contagious. And he had such a heart for teens and a desire to present the gospel to us that he was willing to explore creative ways to do that. So even back in the 80s, he's creating these kind of multimedia presentations that were as savvy, technologically as they could be, with screens and shadow mimes and slide projectors and cassettes and coordinating it all and doing these presentations. And I remember kind of excited about the fact that we could present the gospel to people in ways that isn't boring. We could present the gospel to people in ways that was creative, and it showed beauty and goodness and truth in things that was a language that we were starting to speak more and more, and that made sense to us as young people. So that was a real passion for me. By the time I went off to college, I also played baseball, and so for me it was like a twofold decision. Like, is God calling me to be a Major League Baseball player? I went off to college. I tried out with the Reds and the Pirates and the Mets and different teams, or is he calling me into ministry? So I like to tell people I chose the more spiritually lucrative route, less financially lucrative route, and went into ministry. But for me, it became a desire to pass on what I had experienced and to share the faith with young people and to do it in creative ways. So we just started in the 90s, again, before the internet was even out, right? And we just started grabbing cameras and creating little films that we could use in the programs that we were doing in ministry events with teens. And that, what happened in the mid-90s was great. There was kind of the digital revolution, and things became more accessible. We could actually buy a decent camera and an editing program and a computer and be more sophisticated in what we were doing. I ended up working as a campus minister in a high school for 4 years, and then from there I went and I traveled with this youth minister I had who started a ministry called Cultivation Ministries. And we went around the country and we helped Catholic churches build programs for their teens. Part of that process was showing and helping parishes learn how to evangelize teens. And so we started doing large group events, and in these events we needed content. So we were creating this content. And at the end of these events, people would ultimately come up to us and say, "So where did you get your films?" And we would say, "Well, we made them," and they would, "Can we have them too?" And we just started sharing the things we were making and found that they wanted content to use in their programs. And so that kind of launched us into Outside the Box as a 501c3 not-for-profit to create films initially that would help teens know, love, and serve Jesus, and getting them out there in parishes and schools. So it really, the pattern for me was hearing God say, "I want my life," me doing the best I can, and we all, every morning I wake up, I say, "Lord, here's a new day today. What do you want from me? What do you want me to do with my life?" And just being willing to be on that journey and not knowing where everything's going to go. I look back, and as you get older and you look back, it just, so much of it I couldn't have predicted it, but because I was willing to listen and allow God to say, "Go in this direction," doors open. And doors that you couldn't pry open with a crowbar if you tried. You know what I mean? So, but it came out of what I experienced and a desire to share that with others and then seeing that was a need out there in culture, in Catholic culture at large, and wanting to do something about it.
Yeah, I wish I had such a pure heart at the beginning of mine. I'm from Michigan. I wanted to go to California just to be in the sun. Like, I had to get out of Michigan for the winters. No, I went to L.A., went to school at Loyola Chicago. Our home office is in Chicago, so it's a kind of beautiful full circle thing. And my first job right out of college was touring around the U.S. with an RV with Ben Stein's face on it, with Ben Stein taking around doing this movie about intelligent design. I kind of went to Hollywood in the post-Passion of the Christ moment, so there was a huge awakening in the sense that there is an audience out there that will watch content that has religious Christian themes, religious undertones, or overtones in the case of Passion of the Christ. So there was this giant awareness. So there's an organization called Act One. Act One trains Christians to be writers and producers in Hollywood, and I interned for that organization. And that kind of started me out in Los Angeles. My interest was, I started more on the marketing side. I have kind of a communications acting background, but you kind of find your way where you can, and you kind of bloom where you're planted. What I really enjoyed and what I spent 5-7 years doing was helping bring audiences together with films that they may be passionate about. Mostly I was kind of tasked with being the Catholic guy, like find the Catholics to come out to see the intelligent design movie. Find the Catholics to come out and see the Terrence Malick Tree of Life, or Waiting for Superman about education reform, helping to do, and it really started in this town, grassroots marketing. How do you mobilize communities around content that matters? So more and more, and that's a really exciting thing, to be honest, even as a filmmaker now, like putting audiences together with content they're passionate about. It's a beautiful experience, and it's funny because it dovetails so well with ministry. I have zero ministry background, and it does go together, because I think that's at the heart of a youth minister's, what I've begun to understand is, how do you help a group of distracted teens who have their earbuds in, and I'm the same way, engage with something that's outside of themselves. And so you find all sorts of creative mediums. So it was a really interesting, you would say, the two worlds colliding, but they really do serve each other. And I think for us now, as we transition, it's been exciting because we do these events all around the country. We take, we call them evenings or reflections, or film and reflection. It's like a startup, we're iterating. We take films into parishes all around the country. Eric, one of us, our director of ministry, Doug Took, will come into parishes and host these evenings of dialogue, discussion, prayer around mostly our feature films, but also some of our short form content, and help people, especially Catholics, chew into this content, because it's, I think our evangelical brothers and sisters do it a lot better than we do. Even from a technological standpoint, they're more equipped. Sometimes it's hard for us to, have to dust off the VHS machine and get going. So, but it's been a beautiful ministry opportunity to come in, and because we're also kind of cognizant that there's a group of those, what do you call them, like Christmas and Easter. What's that?
Creasters.
Yeah, they may not come, the church is like a little scary, but like you come for an evening of some good food and watch a movie and have an honest human dialogue. It's like, okay, yeah, you let down your guard, you can get into that. That's just really exciting to, kind of bring it full circle of really being able to take the content where the people are.
So I've got two questions. One kind of a follow-up before we'll open it up to the audience, if you guys have questions for Eric and TJ. But you've kind of touched on individually, where you have different backgrounds, come from different experiences. But here you are, and you're working together, and you have been for quite a while. How do your different backgrounds shape how you view what you do, but also how you interact with one another, and how you solve problems, and the kind of the approach you take to things?
How do we do it? I mean, I'll say, like, coming from the Hollywood side and a strong business background, and working with Eric with such a strong, a ministry foundation, people first. We often say people before products, but I think we say that because it's had to kind of come out of a journey together of like, what's the emphasis here? Are we product focused? Yes, you have to be product focused, but if you lose people along the way, then what's the point? What are we doing? So that's been like one like super concrete way that I think we try to keep in the forefront. Like what's our priorities here? Like what, how do we discern what the next step? Sometimes it's tricky business dealings. I mean, this movie was, some incredibly intense deal making, but we always kind of ground it back with like, are we being authentic? Are we trying to be true to the people we're working with?
TJ was such a gift to me. We had been in a company for almost 10 years. Just a lot of people, I mean, you kind of get homogenous. Do you know what I mean? Like the people you have around you, the people who, especially for us, coming out of a ministry background and certainly doing things creatively, but still having people around us who, when you say the catchphrase, everybody gets it. When you say, just you're on the same page. And then to a certain degree, that can kind of stagnate progress, in terms of growing and being outside the box and learning. So when TJ came along with a very different life experience and a different background, absolutely, in love with Christ, just like we are, but coming from a different experience, not a ministry background, it was a real eye-opening gift for us. It expanded how I saw things. Expanded how I looked at things, It expanded my my understanding and just looking at how people we are the body of Christ with many parts, and we all have something really unique to bring to the table. And when we do that, it's beautiful. What we can do together is way more beautiful than what I can do on my own. And our organization is really team-driven like that. We've got some really great people around the table who come from all kinds of experiences, and what we can lay out there together and pray about and discern and create together is beautiful. And I think that's the gift of when you work with an organization. And there's a lot of like back and forth too, just even clarifying on how things are shared or said, or just really trying to dig in and to understand the thought process is really helpful for me and for our organization.
So one more question, and then we'll open it up. You're talking about how film and media just have the ability to draw people in, especially things that are true, good, and beautiful, as you mentioned. And I think as this generation is growing, I mean, media is just such a part of our lives. And so, our recent popes have said we're not called to be afraid to use these tools for evangelization. But I'm sure in Hollywood and just in the film industry that can be difficult. So can you share a little bit about, what role you think the Catholic world plays in media? Because that's a very specific role in evangelization, and just the importance of that, and what you do to maintain your Catholic identity within that world.
Here's a quiz. Does anybody know the very last apostolic letter that John Paul II wrote, St. John Paul II wrote when he was Pope? The last apostolic letter he wrote. It's the quiz. Anne-Marie, do you know? It was called The Rapid Development. And it was a letter to people in communications in the church, which is essentially was like everybody who has a mouth, right? And I mean, it was a very foretelling document. And in that document, essentially what John Paul was saying in that document is that don't look at these multimedias as something that secular culture created, and now we, the church, have to jump on and use it for our purposes too. He was arguing in it and saying that he used the term intermerifica. Like this is from the beautiful mind, the beautiful heart of God. This is from the mind of God, and it has great intention and purpose. And so we know that media, like the internet, we know like the conduit to get things out there is a morally neutral conduit, but what we do with it and what we create is what matters. And he was saying, and one of my favorite lines in that document, he says, everything possible must be done so that the gospel might permeate society, stimulating people to listen to and embrace its message. Everything possible. So looking at the media. I have a son. We adopted a son from Haiti. He's 20 now. We brought him home when he was just a year old. And as a result of that, I was able to get connected and do a number of film projects down in Haiti. And I don't know if anybody here's been to Haiti and you know of Haiti, very poor country in our Western Hemisphere. And one of the things that I was always amazed by is the poverty and living in these cinder block houses with the tin roofs and the light bulbs. And there was several years ago, I had a span of about 3 years where I didn't go back. Finally, I went back and I noticed something was really just hit me really clear. Was the the poverty is there, but I started to notice that people like had smartphones, even in these poor countries. You know, it made me think about like John Paul's message, like everything possible must be done, and that the world is becoming. And this is a whole nother conversation. We're becoming way more disconnected in our connectivity. But we're also in that digital connectivity, we can access places and corners with messages and things that we've never been able to do that before. And so that has been an inspirational thing for us, for me, in that call to bring Christ into that space. And it is very challenging.
Just piggybacking on that, another Pope story. The next one, Pope Benedict, we had an opportunity to show Full of Grace to him, our first movie, and this was when he was emeritus, and just had a brief conversation with him. And the thing that came out in that dialogue were two things, and we've kind of taken it to heart, which is when making a movie, in Malta, for 3 months, what you're doing there is you're meeting people possibly unfamiliar with the gospel, in their work, in their catering job, in their truck driving job, in their wardrobe job, that may never know a Catholic. In fact, we meet this a lot of time. Like they've never actually seen someone who actually practices their faith, and it's a new experience. So an opportunity there for relationship and dialogue, and that's been. I mean, we have so many stories about that. Just journeying with people, and that at the end of the day, you have a product at the end of the day that you can take around the world. And so very awe-inspiring, especially Paul, knowing that we were in, how many countries do you think we were in?
30 countries, yeah.
Like 30 countries around the world, like this little film that could, again, so there's an example of, I mean, we did our thing, we were honest and true to the development of that story, and then ultimately you kind of put it in the Sony machine and it chugs it out there. We didn't actually do much on that front, but pretty incredible that it can have that wide-reaching effect.
It's so like just as much as making the film, like cultivating an environment on set, cultivating an environment of dignity and love and respect and that's not a typical Hollywood experience. Is really that's a missional value for us. Because we know, and as TJ said, many stories. I love to tell one story. Olivier starts thinking about Dave, too, in Full of Grace. Our first assistant director, I got to know him a little bit. It was just, obviously we all got to know him, and I didn't know a lot about the role of the first assistant director, but they're kind of like they kind of run the ship in terms of what's going on take by take on the set. They call action, they know the script, they know the time, how much time we have to do that scene, et cetera, et cetera. And Dave was a really, an interesting guy. He grew up in Hollywood, Jewish background, but he had shared with me along the way that he never stepped foot in a church in his life, a synagogue in his life. A little rough around the edges, like we all can be, right? But I get the question a lot, like, so where did you find all the Catholic people to be in your film and help produce it? And our goal is, Lord, you bring exactly who you want to have at that table, whether it's the actor or the person hanging the lights or whatever. And I went up to Dave kind of halfway near the end, and I said, "Hey, Dave, can I interview you for a behind-the-scenes video?" And he looked at me kind of cross-eyed, like, "Why would you want to interview me? I'm the first AD." But he was also kind of honored that I asked him. And he said, "Yeah." And so the last day of filming was a 10-day shoot. I was putting some some stuff away, just helping, and I feel this tap on my shoulder. I kind of forgot, and I looked, and it was Dave, and he asked me, "Are you ready for that interview?" And I said, "Yeah." So I grabbed my behind-the-scenes camera, and I said, "Well, why don't you just tell the viewer what the first assistant director does?" So he started to talk a little bit about that, and he stopped for a minute, and he looked off camera at me, and he said, "So should I refer to this as a Catholic thing or a Christian thing or what?" and he had been with us for a couple weeks and more time with TJ and prep with that and just getting to know our heart. And I said with him, we're Catholic, but our heart with this film is that whether you're Catholic or you're evangelical or you're a non-believer or wherever you're at in your life, there's something valuable for it, so you can call it whatever you want. And he said, okay, and he looked into the camera and he said, this is the first Catholic thing that I've ever been a part of. And he started to cry. And I remember I was a little surprised, and I think he was a little taken back that I don't think he expected that emotional reaction. But he went on and he said 3 things. He said, the script was beautiful. It was great to hear. He said, we became like a family producing it. That really swelled my heart. That we created an environment that was that brought meaning to him. That was conducive for just a good environment. But the third thing he said it made faith accessible. And that was, again, that moment of like creating an environment where we can be a conduit for whatever God wants to do in relationships. We had on a lesser scale, but a really similar sentiment with Olivier on the Paul set.
Olivier Martinez, he's a kind of what was his famous movie he was in with? I'm wondering if you guys.
He was in SWAT. He was in.
SWAT.
He's
a tough guy.
Yeah.
Biker, unfaithful.
Yeah, unfaithful. She knows.
His favorite thing to do is find a chair to sit down on. He thinks that this is the most important role as an actor is to find your chair and sit and smoke a cigarette, and always kind of leery of like what's going on here.
Frenchie.
But by the end, he, in a very simple way, but when you realize the profundity of this guy who's was married to Halle Berry and he's been in the Hollywood machine. He's like, this is the first time that Christianity didn't come across as bullshit. Excuse my French, but his French. He's French.
And we were like, thank you.
But it was just one of those moments where you're like, all we did was just love on the guy. We gave him an opportunity to be a part of something beautiful, something bigger than themselves. We never push anything on anybody other than you can be a part of an artwork that ultimately it's up to God to do the work.
That's awesome. Some great witness. So we've got about 30 minutes, and we are going to open up to questions in the audience. So we're going to come down. Just raise your hand if you have a question. There's already hands going up, and Kate or I will come to you with a microphone. And just say your name and where you're from.
Hi, Matthew Greenfield. I'm from this area, Maryland area. Thanks so much for coming today. My question for you guys is this. Do you have any plans for any pro-life movies coming up? And as far as other movies in general coming up, I know a lot of Christian movies tend to be overly sweet, saccharine. I like things that raise the stakes, like Paul did, like make it real. There's drama and stuff like that. Is that your intent for your films to come about in the future?
Yeah, right now we're in this kind of path of doing these incredible historic characters that are a part of the tradition of faith. Either in the Catholic world, we're also exploring some that are Protestant, but are incredible historic stories of faith. I think that's what convicts us are people who lived in incredible circumstances and overcame odds. So pro-life in the sense like it would be deeply imbued in it. Right now, no overt plans. Our next big project is we're working on a 8-part mini-series on St. Patrick, which we think will be a real fun thing. We hope it's on Amazon, Hulu, but it's more Vikings meets Braveheart. It's an incredible story. I don't know if as a lifelong Catholic, I didn't really know, and Irish, I didn't really know Patrick's real story. Former slave who returns to the land of his enslavement. Has an incredible journey. Has to face the Druid overlords and the Celtic people, and so anyway, it's a fun show. But ultimately, it will be about portraying what Patrick's encounter was, but within the context that would work in that way.
I think we feel called as an organization in filmmaking to make things, as I use the word, accessible to everyone out there. Without compromising the stories. And really, when you look at these stories, they're amazing stories. And if we tell them in a very real way and not a saccharine way, I think that's what will allow the viewer to go to seek to connect, to find the tissues that they connect to. You know, we all too often in the Christian film space shove people down a very narrow path, and we kind of say, this is what we want you to think and believe. And ultimately, of course, we want people to be connected to Christ and experience the beauty, goodness, and truth through what we're creating. But we also want to present things in a very real and human way that allows them to see something that makes sense to their lived experience. And I think that's that's kind of one of the checkpoints for us to make sure we're doing that.
My name is Gregory Bycraft, and I'm from South Bend in Indiana. And I
Go
guess
Irish.
Yeah, season tickets is 1922. But anyway, so what I was wondering is, with your film, especially with Paul, which went through a major, I think, like publisher or distributor or whatever you want to call it, of Sony Pictures, because I know by and large much of the film world is either openly or story-wise opposed to a lot of the messages of the church and all that. So, like, what was going on with the rest of the film people when they saw this film? Like, I remember going and seeing it and thinking it was wonderful, but all the reviews were like, oh, it's bad. So...
Do you have the names of those reviewers?
Yeah, it was... I don't remember.
I'm just kidding.
It was the...
Just kidding.
No, but I guess the point. What I'm wondering is how does
know what you're
the rest of the world of film react to you starting to enter actual like feature film?
We had our entryway was not our entry into that was good with Sony. Sony was one of the only, after the TJ had mentioned when The Passion came out, there was kind of this recognition that culture was open to things with faith content. And Sony was the only company really that developed a division for faith content. So some of you may have seen some of these things way back when there was a small Baptist church, with the Kendrick brothers who did this Facing the Giants film, and then they did Courageous and Fireproof and War Room, and just so they had a division that was sensitive to that, and that's who we partnered with to do the film. And TJ can speak certainly more to the production process because he's our lead in that. But there were many moments along the way. We realized we're this small little not-for-profit organization, and we're partnering with a division of a multi-billion-dollar organization that certainly the data and the bottom line and making as much money as they can and being as resourceful as they can is what's going to keep everybody their jobs. But they also have this division also has a missional heart. So it was very interesting for us to journey. I think a lot of times we were kind of facing two kinds of different decision-making processes. This is the way it's done, and this is the data, and this is why we do this. And then for us, discernment in decisions, and prayer in decisions, and God, what do you want us to do? Because sometimes, the data might be here, and it might say 40 out of 40 times you're going to do it this way, and then along comes the Holy Spirit and says, yeah, I know that's what makes sense on paper, but I'm going to have you do it this way.
And that was constant over and over again. And this division markets to, by and large, mainstream evangelical Christians. This is the first time that they partnered with a Catholic organization. So that, in some respect, was a new thing for them. We also did the marketing for the film. So we took the film around to Catholic parishes. We took Jim Caviezel. We hired Jim because we thought that would be helpful to getting you out to the audience, out to the theater. That also comes with another side. One big learning I have, this is something I'm just now processing, that by and large Catholics and secular folks, which that can be a synonymous term, like The Passion. They got behind that. That was an interesting film. What I didn't know is a lot of evangelicals didn't like the Passion. It was a little too much. It was a little too over the top. It was Mel Gibson's theology, etc. Whereas So when we cast Jim, we thought it was going to be a home run, and it was from a acting standpoint, from a marketing standpoint. But it came with its own perception in the market. So there's an example where you think what you're communicating will be received in different ways for different audiences. But what I can say is that our Catholic audience, we demonstrated that most Catholics came out to see Paul the most since the Passion of the Christ. So it was a big win for us. We largely don't come out to see faith films as Catholics. This may be an exception to the rule. So again, there's always different reactions. One thing I was thinking about, just a general secular response, they have no problem with faith matters. A lot of people think like big bad Hollywood is against faith. They're like, if you can make money and you can tell a good story, great. They don't care what it is. So it's about us doing our job better. It's about telling the stories better. It's about being able to drive audiences. My favorite review was from the Village Voice in New York, which is a really left-leaning music, I think, and culture rag in New York. And the headline was, "It's a miracle. This atheist movie reviewer kind of like Paul, Apostle of Christ." I was like, yeah.
Best
all right.
review ever.
But honestly, an olive branch, that someone who would be usually opposed to that kind of saccharine content, because it was a historic drama, it was a well-made story. It was accessible for them. Thanks for your question.
Hey guys, I'm Dean. I'm from Los Angeles, so bringing a little bit of that Hollywood background, born and raised there. So my question, you guys, you've mentioned some of this stuff already, but living in Hollywood, having worked there, there's a lot of superficiality. The Hollywood world that we all kind of perceive and love is not necessarily everything that happens under the scenes, and there's a lot of influences that go beyond. I guess my question to you is, you have certain people that can influence things in the right way. There's people like Mark Wahlberg, who in a sense, in one respect, doing films that are not the best, but in another sense, he's a devout Catholic and very active in his community. You have other actors that are like that. You have people in the clergy who are out in Hollywood who are able to have access to these people. So you have a lot of people who actually have that faith in their background. It's interesting to see that, we jump from Passion of the Christ to Paul the Apostle. There's not that much in between. It seems like we don't see it in the Oscars. We don't see it in the industry really in general. It's not a category that we're really feeling or seeing that often. What are the strides? I mean, this is a breakthrough that finally came in the last year. What are the strides being taken that you have all these people at your hands, and you say a lot of it has to do with money, and if you can make money, or if you can reach people in a certain medium, that's how you're going to get through. How in a bigger way are you guys getting there in the industry that, maybe eventually there will be a category, a religious category in the Oscars, best religious film, but we're not there yet. So how is that, coming along?
I love what you said, but I do think getting the best picture is, in a sense, being we've done our job. Like, I don't know if we would need one. I think we should aspire to making a best picture so that the world could see that this is great filmmaking, this is great storytelling. I see what you're saying. The influence of the industry is powerful around the world. But I guess I just have a soft spot in my heart for those who work in Hollywood, for those who are out there. And we're given the opportunity, in a sense, to hire and engage people, craftsmen, doing their job. That's really been a beautiful way for us. Our production designer, he was a guy who walked away from the church when he was 13. He did Three Musketeers on BBC. He's a big production designer. Walked away from the church at 13 because his priest didn't want him doing the rock band stuff. And, whatever, that for him just cut him out. He didn't want to have anything to do with the church. First time back with anything religious at all. And you could tell he wants to work with us again. He anytime there's a project, he wants us to be there. So I bring that up just because I think it's about engaging folks who are excellent at what they do, and invite them onto a project like Paul or one of our other projects to help kind kind of parlay their excellence with what we're doing, so we improve by their work, and we may help them along the way mysteriously. I mean, the other thing that comes to mind is our composer is a Oscar award-winning composer. So there's another example. Like, we thought he would cost so much money, and he did. But in fact, he loved the content first and foremost. So it's like, so to have an Oscar winner say, I want to work on this $5 million biblical feature and be able to journey with him, learn from him. Our project benefits from his skill set. And, we're able to have him work on Paul and not, the 13th Freddy Krueger movie, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, not that I have anything against horror movies, but maybe there's something edifying in this film that will help him along the way.
I've met a few people along the way who have been in production who are like, they're Catholic. I'm going to go to Hollywood and I'm going to change Hollywood.
I was that way.
Yeah, and it's an impossibility. And I don't mean to deny God's move. That mentality, it really is like the mentality should be one thing at a time. One person at a time, one project at a time, one experience at a time. Not to be cliche, but just that whole, like, if you've heard the story of the kid seeing all the starfish on the shore, and he runs down and wants to throw the starfish out because they got trapped during the tide, and he's with someone who's like, well, you can't save all those starfish, and he's like, I know, but I can save this one, and just one person at a time. And I think it's being true to what God is calling us to do in this moment, and again, I love what TJ said about our goal should be to win Best Picture. Like, we should have that kind of excellence in everything we do, that we should strive that this film we're making is going to be Academy Award winning Oscar Best Picture. And there are films out there, it doesn't have to be a Christian film to be a Christian film. I love what Mel Gibson did with Hacksaw Ridge last summer. It was beautiful. That story and the way he told the story. So I think it's we have to absolutely, even more so as Catholics, even more so as people who have a call on their life from God. And we're producers, but no matter what you're doing, no matter what the call is on your life, you should be the best. We should be the best, not because of an arrogance, but because of a passion for the call that God has put in our life and a love for the people He's put in our path.
My name's Deacon Cassidy. I'm a seminarian from the Diocese of Richmond. So for young Catholics who feel like they are called to evangelize in some way through working in the media or want to support the media in their ministry, how would you recommend going about developing the skills to create media that is beautiful and true and can actually stand alongside these other productions from Hollywood or whatever other medium that you're working in? Because I think we want to have media that is true and beautiful and proclaiming the faith, either explicitly or implicitly, but also can stand up alongside it, be the best, as you said. How would you recommend developing to the point where you have those skills? Secular, other industries?
Oh, I see. So you're saying like people within dioceses or parishes, like not necessarily folks that are on the, like, practitioners in ministry?
Either one, but I'm thinking specifically in terms of developing skills for proclaiming the faith, but doing so on a level that is on par with the secular industry.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of good examples. I mean, Act One is a great program. Myself and Katie Reedy, another person in our organization, has followed that. That's sort of like the best Christians in Hollywood, or the most outspoken Christians in Hollywood, give their time, donate their time to train writers and directors in the craft. So I'm all for, like, go to USC Film School, go to UCLA. I mean, if you're, if that's your path, learn from the masters. Don't, and then there are different, later in life, if you're in your late 20s and 30s and you want to come up to speed, I think there are a lot of different options. American Film Institute. More on the Catholic side, I'm thinking of John Paul the Great. JP2 out in Escondido is a great on the university side. So there are two different ways if you want to do it as a for a degree program or professional development. There are two different kind of programs. There's also a lot of good stuff online right now. Master class. Has anybody done any of the master classes? Like Aaron Sorkin is teaching screenwriting. They have Annie Leibovitz teaching photography. So there are ways, I think, now to kind of come up to speed with the industry standards. I think it's really exciting.
On a real practical, just too, I just say dive in. You know, like I had no degrees in filmmaking, but I knew that's where we were going, and I just started diving in, practicing things. Remember when those flip cameras came out that you could plug in with the USB drive? Like one of my sons, I made like 100 Lego stop motion films with his flip camera. You know, I mean, the things that you have at your disposal now, and if you have that desire to be a filmmaker, to learn the skills. And then when it comes to, like, I think connecting it to who you are and what you're feeling in your call and through Christ, you know, I think there in a lot of ways is just that your personal growth as a Christian, your personal, what's your prayer? How much time are you spending in prayer and growing in faith and discipleship? And I've never really looked at my life as this compartmentalized, separated. It just all goes together. You know, my faith and my work and my family and my work, and it's all together. So just dive in too.
Hello, I'm a Salesian sister of St. John Bosco from New Jersey. And first, I just want to say thank you for the quality work that you produced. I mean, there was Noah with Russell Crowe, and there was no flood there, right? Just a little trickle. So, you know, you did quality work. Thank you. Actually, the seminarian asked the question I was going to ask, really. And you've also answered it in other ways previously when you said, set the bar high, go where God leads you, you know, use your talents. So my question then, I'd like to ask, earlier in the interview, you had said, I followed where God led, and it opened up a lot of doors that I wouldn't have been able to pry open with a crowbar. Would you be willing to share one or two stories in what doors opened? And, you know, because those are miracle stories in a way. You know, and would also be very inspiring because you followed the inspiration. God opened the doors rather than you doing it by human effort.
Sure. I'm trying to think if anything is like really profound, like for me, as much as it is just part of the journey, you know, and step by step, just exploring. I know going all the way back, it was a leap for me to decide not to play ball, you know, and to go into ministry. But I think it's more of just that process of you know, step by step and day by day, and exploring this relationship, trying out this creative thing in a ministry program. You know, it's more of just looking and saying, I couldn't plan this stuff. Like I when I was doing youth ministry at a campus as a campus minister in 1991 or 93, it wouldn't have made any sense for me whatsoever to think that we would be producing a feature film that would come to the theater. So it's kind of like the big picture of it, looking and seeing just in that journey, like in a lot of steps along the way that all are the connective tissue that kind of gets you there. That's not the most exciting answer, but it's not. I don't necessarily think there were like a huge amount of profound like go this direction, as much as it was just day by day and step by step. And sometimes you're like, what am I doing here? And then the grace comes and you figure it out, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So we're talking about Paul, Apostle Christ movie. Yesterday was the feast day of the conversion of St. Paul, and my name is Paul. So it's a good time for Pauls.
I think we found our winner. We have a Paul DVD we were going to give you.
So I'm on the next movie, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I better be.
Sure,
my name is Paul.
The sequel to Paul?
Paul 2, the real Paul. My name is Paul, and I'm a seminarian for the Diocese of Richmond, much like Deacon Cassidy, but he's cooler than me. And my question is, you've got these movies like Prince of Egypt and The Passion of the Christ and The Nativity and Hacksaw Ridge.
Prince of Egypt.
Yeah,
I mean, that's like 1992. How old are you? That's amazing.
So these are movies that me having a lot of background in like public school and places where they're like the Catholic faith isn't really like that big. In an artistic area like Richmond, those movies are held at really high standards. Like they're really, really like valued by art students and film students. And Paul, the Apostle of Christ, is one of those movies now, having actors like Jim Caviezel and James Faulkner and Joanne. What was it like? What's it like knowing that you were now sort of like that movie is sort of in that spot where like it's appreciated like more than just like a film, but like a work of art, but like as a good like film that people of all different places of learning, like they appreciate it. What's that like, kind of having that like be a thing?
It feels pretty cool. No, I mean, in fact, it's nice to hear someone say it like that, to be honest. I think we operate in a little bit of a bubble, or at least I do in Hollywood, where it's, we don't hear things like that very often. So thank you very much for saying that. And a term that we have kind of coined with these films are sacred art house, and that these are using the best of independent filmmaking techniques and tools that one is at our disposal. But at the end of the day, we're interested in, showing something beautiful, like you'd walk into a cathedral and you would look up, or that cathedral we were just in, you look up and you're just bowled over by the beauty. I mean, you don't have to be Catholic to say like, damn, that's beautiful. And then there's a whole story there that you can go on. We often say like cathedrals, as important as they are, and they're here to stay, thank God, but where people are gathering in like little theaters around the country, they're little churches. So if we can, in a sense, give a person an experience of a cathedral, bring it to them in an alternative space, it's a gift. It's a real gift. So thank you.
All right. Well, that was our last question. Sorry, guys. I know I see a lot of hands that were still flying up, but unfortunately, we're out of time. So can we get a big round of applause? A thank you for TJ and Eric. Thank you guys so much. That was awesome.
Thank you so much.